Hello, and welcome to As Built, the podcast from Graphic Machine about architecture firms, buildings, and how both get built. I am your co-host, Patience Jones. With me is
Brian Jones,
your other co-host. And on today's episode, we are talking about another growth challenge. This one is bringing two firms together. So, congratulations! Your firm has either acquired someone else, you've merged with another firm, or you have been acquired by someone. What happens next? And every time I think about this, I think about the movie Step Brothers. If you haven't seen it, first of all, what's wrong with you? You have to see the movie Step Brothers. Secondly, I think it's a really good analogy for often what happens when two firms are coming together, no matter the mechanism by which they're doing that.
I mean, I think that if you've gotten to the point where the acquisition has happened, the merger has happened, and you haven't had any preceding conversations, then there's going to be a fairly bumpy integration.
Which so often happens. And I will just caveat when you say you haven't had any of the conversations, I think oftentimes lots of conversations are had, but they're not necessarily had about the real core things, like who's going to be in charge, who decides what kinds of projects we take on, who decides when it's time to hire new people. You spend a lot of time on things like the financial structure, which is very important.
Sure.
But all of these other things are just as important.
The day-to-day things, the things that how a job gets staffed, how the teams are brought together. How do you assess where there are new talents that weren't in either of the old firms before, and how do you bring out those talents onto projects? So it's a thorny thing to go through, but an important one in order for it to make a very sustainable, newly formed firm.
Well, you're going to at some point have to make these decisions and have these conversations, and they can either be the conversations that you have before everything is done, or they can be the yelling matches that you have after everything is done and everyone's mad,
or after a fair number of your staff turns over and leaves because they don't enjoy a ill-prepared environment where they are now working.
And people, they are more comfortable when they know who's in charge and who they report to and what's expected of them. And we have seen companies in lots of different industries go through this change only to find out that each party had a different idea of what was even happening. One thought it was a merger, and so they were going to have this new entity with equal say. And one party thought that they were acquiring the other firm and they were going to keep their name and they were going to tell the other firm what to do. So you can imagine how well that went once it started to shake out. And every single time there have been issues, people say, well, we didn't want to disrupt the deal. We didn't want to make it more difficult. We didn't want to put obstacles in the way. We figured we'd work all that out later.
Well, you will, but it will be painful. And it may come at the expense, like I said before, of staff leaving or of the firm really reaching a moment where it can't get the work done that it needs to get done because there are all these internal turmoil issues happening.
Well, and if you're entering into a deal with somebody where you think you're going to be equal partners and they think they're going to be your boss, it is way better to know that before you go into that and then it just doesn't work out.
Yeah.
And I know everybody gets upset about all the money that they could have made, but it's better that deal fall apart because it's never going to be sustainable.
So let's break this down. There's kind of like a few tranches of things that are important. There's, the logistical things. That bucket would be, name of the firm, who's going to be in charge, sort of operational considerations on that front. There might be another bucket that's devoted to what I think are lifestyle implications. What is the day-to-day vibe or operating, principle within the firm? Because that can be very different between two firms. And hopefully you've picked one that might be culturally similar to yours, but like frequently that isn't the case. And then the last one would be, how does the process of work getting done, how is that different between the firms and how can it be brought together? And those are a lot of conversation points that are super critical. I'm sure there are others, but those are the ones that come to mind that are really important to break apart.
Yeah, and I think it requires being able, as we say so many times in this podcast, but to be able to take a step back, because there are lots of things about your firm that you do every day, that other people do every day, that you don't even realize are different, because that's your reality,
Yeah.
that's your universe. And just as much as those things are so inimical to what you're doing, that's how it is for the other firm that's doing all of their things. It doesn't even occur to them that there's another way
Yeah.
to do it. So you both think, oh, this is going to be, obviously, this other firm is going to do it the same way we do, because this is the only way you do things. So having those, I don't know, like realizations, I guess. And if the coming together of the two firms, whether it's a merger and acquisition, whatever it is, if that's something that can be shared with the staff of the two firms, and to have open dialogue about, well, how late do you work? Do you take work home? What happens when you have a problem with a partner? How does work get assigned here? Where people can just ask all kinds of questions and talk about their experiences, that will help get a lot of this out, so that you as leadership can start to identify, okay, here's where we need a bridge process. Here's where we need to work on shaping some of this.
Well, and just like you would with a new employee that was coming into your firm, you would have an onboarding experience for them where you're walking them through how you get things done. And in an instance where you're acquiring a firm, that very much may be the mindset that you want to adopt, is that you've hired X number of new employees and you need to bring them into the fold of the way that your firm works. Otherwise, it's going to be a very difficult transition.
But I think that's a really important decision that you have to make, is even if you have acquired that firm, what do you want process to be? And do you want them to be integrated with everything that you do?
Yeah.
Or did you hire them because they have a particular expertise and you just want them to do what they do, but now they do it for you? So, they can keep all their systems and all their approaches. It really requires a lot of thinking and planning about things that are not so tactile.
And, no matter whether it is a equal parts merger or an acquisition, it's really important to bring both parties to the table to have all these conversations so that there's a clear, even if there's an ultimate decider in the group that says this is the way that we're doing something, to be part of that conversation is pretty crucial to making sure the transition can be as seamless as possible.
Because however little this changes your day to day, it is going to change the day to day of the people who work for you. And how much you help them with that change is going to directly impact whether they decide to stay.
Yeah.
And you may be super excited about the fact that this is this, great coming together, joining forces and blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't really matter to the person who now wakes up every day dreading coming to work. They kind of don't care about the bigger picture. They will leave and go somewhere else.
Make no mistake, even in the best of circumstances, there is an adjustment period for everyone involved in one of these scenarios. And you can't go into it thinking that it's going to be, day one, everything's operational and there's no hiccups that we have to address. That's not probably a realistic worldview to have.
I mean, you can have it. You'll be sorely disappointed when it doesn't work out. But
yeah, but you can have it nonetheless.
the other audience that you have to keep in mind for this change is your clients, who, unless you tell them why this is good for them, are going to panic. If you're becoming larger, they're going to fear that they're getting lost, or they're going to get dumped, or they're going to get passed to somebody that isn't you.
Yeah.
If you are becoming, staying the same size, but you're splitting up the practice somehow, they're worried that their project isn't going to get the attention that it used to be getting, or maybe you're not going to handle their type of work anymore, or maybe your fees are going to increase by 5x. These are all things that will go through their minds whether they ask you about them or not. So having really clear conversations with your clients to say,
This is what's real.
this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and this is how it's going to benefit you. We're bringing on people that have all this different expertise, and so this means your project will be XY, or we'll be able to handle these other services that we weren't before, or we'll be able to develop your project more seamlessly, whatever it is. If there are things that the client might not be so psyched about, like we are going to have to raise our rates by 30%, just have that conversation. Just tell them in this same conversation, the economic realities of this, though, are that here's what this means to your bottom line, or we're not raising your rates now, but on subsequent projects, we may come in higher than we have historically. It is a fact. If that is the fact, then that's the fact, and it's better that the client hear it from you in an environment where they can express how they feel about it than to wonder, to worry, or to just, get a letter one day that sort of
Announces this.
coldly announces it.
Yep.
And you should have these conversations before you make your big press announcement about your new name change or your new
Acquisition.
logo, whatever.
Yep.
Because if the client doesn't hear it from you, they're not going to trust you.
And they're going to feel like they weren't brought along for the entire process. So what do you think the big takeaways are for this?
Again, I feel like such a broken record, but take a step back and try to look at what is your firm really? How does it operate? How does it make decisions? How do you assign projects? So that you can identify ways in which you might need to do some consensus building, some reshaping, so that everybody is having a good experience. Be really clear about what the goals of this change are, and be really clear about the actual mechanics of the change. What literally is happening right here, and does everybody agree that this is what's happening?
I would say the other takeaway I would say is this is an opportunity, not necessarily a negative. It is an opportunity to make something new that's better than what you had before, and to really to make use of that in every way that you can, and to help your team see it that way, and to help keep sort of a positive outlook through the process, even though there are going to be challenges along the way. Letting them know that can often do a lot towards morale.
I think that's a really good point. And if you have seen Step Brothers, the goal of this is to get everybody to the Catalina Wine Mixer, where everyone is having a great time. And if you haven't seen Step Brothers, there's another reason for you to go watch it. Pow pow. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.